Hello. Thank you for being here today. For those of you on the live stream, we have pinned a link in the chat. You can go to that link and our agenda is there. It's also a good resource because afterward you'll see one of our speakers has already put up a resource document, but we'll be adding more afterward, plus the video. My name is Rebecca Kiesling, and I have the honor to be the executive director at NAMI Northern Virginia. If you're not familiar with NAMI, we are the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We're 50 years old across the country. NAMI Northern Virginia is one of 700 local affiliates. So we have state offices in 50 states. I think that's right. Ours is in Richmond. And then we have over 700 local affiliates. Some are super small. Our biggest is in San Diego. We're kind of right in the middle. And we handle and support the people of Northern Virginia, minus Prince William. They have their own affiliate. I've been here for almost 3 years. I went to GW for my undergraduate, Georgetown for my graduate. I'm a Boston girl, so if there's any Boston fans, Celtics are still doing okay. We're still in it. And I went to GW and then immediately moved to Arlington the day after graduation. I've lived in Northern Virginia since. I have 3 daughters. 2 went through Woodson High School, and 1 is a freshman at Woodson. So we belong here. We're part of this. And when I saw the application for this job, it was a passion. It was, I like my job, but. And I feel that's why people get into nonprofits. So what do? We provide no-cost mental health support, education, and advocacy for people that need it. And everybody needs it. How many people have physical health? Every hand. Okay, that's good. That's better than normal. I usually have to ask it a few times. How many people have mental health? And that's really, those hands, and hopefully at home as well, that's really what we're working towards. We're trying to break down walls, break down stigmas, break down barriers, so that everyone can have mental health support. And that support comes in all different ways. For us, it's all peer-led, so people with lived experience. Family members who've supported adult children for 20 years. We have a support group for LGBTQ youth. We are starting support groups for the Black and African ancestry communities. We want people to see themselves in what we do. That's why I am not going to talk. We are so honored to have put together this panel with the help of our wonderful panelists. Bios are in the program, so we don't have to, I don't know about y'all, but when your bio is read, it's a weird experience. So it's in your program. These are 5 people who I respect tremendously. I think they are going to bring to you different perspectives on a really big problem. And this really big problem is one that we can't do alone. NAMI can't do it alone. The local government, even the federal government, we can't do it alone. We can't be in a silo. We have to have a comprehensive community-wide approach to it. And that's what these people do. So it's a safe space. If something that's being talked about is bothering you, turn off your computer, walk to the back, because sometimes when we talk about hard topics, it can trigger you. We will have questions at the end. They're going to sit and have questions themselves, but we will open it up too. And you can put them in the chat as well. So thank you. I'm going to introduce now Christian Bentley, who I met recently, but was floored by how he spoke about his experience, not only his lived experience, but his experience in advocacy. So Christian.
Good evening and welcome to St. Joseph's Catholic Church. It's really apropos that we're hosting this conversation today because we are a community that is staffed by the Josephite Order of Priests and Brothers, who are the only order in the entire world that their charism or mission is to serve the African American people in the United States. So we are glad to welcome you. St. Joseph's is celebrating its 110th anniversary this year. We were founded because of Jim Crow. Many of our parishioners were attending St. Mary's, which is down the road, and because of Jim Crow laws, discrimination, and racism, they wanted a community where they could worship freely. And so they petitioned the bishop in Richmond, and the Josephites came and staffed it. And at the time, Mother Catherine Drexel of the Drexel family of Philadelphia used her money to help build schools and churches all over the United States for African American and Native Americans, including this one that we're at today. Today, our legacy is very important. We stand for social justice. We stand for the marginalized and the oppressed, because that is what the gospel teaches, and it's also what Catholic social teaching teaches, which is our doctrine of how we care for people, how we care for creation. And so our community here at St. Joseph takes that very seriously, and it's why we have partnerships with Concerned Citizens Network of Alexandria, partnerships with the city, with our police department, with our sheriff's department, with our fire department, because we believe in building community. Now, community doesn't mean that we always agree. Community doesn't mean that we think the same or we look the same. We're a diverse congregation, not only of skin complexion, but also of thought. But we stand with what we have in common, and that is our Imago Dei, that we are all created in the image of God. So welcome to St. Joseph Catholic Church. Now about myself, my name's Christian. I manage a bipolar 1 disorder, and I recently just celebrated, and I celebrate is right, 10 years of that diagnosis. And I say diagnosis because it was very difficult for me to be diagnosed. And this is really sad, but I'm going to be honest with you. As an articulate, professional, Black man, I was told I was just having a nervous breakdown, I was fine. I mean, this is by clinicians. And finally, not getting the care that I needed, it culminated to a suicide attempt that was rather serious. That led to a series of hospital stays. In that hospital stays, I really recognized how inequitable care is, sometimes how we don't have the same respect for people just because they're suffering from an illness. Never saw another relative who was in for heart surgery or back surgery or knee replacement be treated the way that I was being treated. So that was like, little flag. From there, because I was experiencing extreme manics and trying to figure out medications and the litany of woe that came from that, I found myself in the criminal justice system. And that really opened my eyes to inequity. If you had an attorney, your charges were dropped and you were sent home on probation. If you didn't have an attorney, you went to jail. And I saw that over and over and over again. And so it really opened my mind and my eyes to the injustices that we were facing. Now, I was very privileged, and so I survived those things and was able to achieve wellness where I'm at today. And in that wellness, I recognized that I have a responsibility to speak up. Because a funny story, when I was first diagnosed, and I Googled for blogs, I found this one very nice white lady in Colorado who, on her blog, talking about taking 3 months off after her manic episode and hiking in the mountains to find peace and tranquility and grounding. I had kids, a job, responsibilities. There was no way I could do that. And so when I achieved wellness, it made me really recognize that I need to speak up for the voiceless. There's inequities and injustices in our system that is not right. And I have the privilege to be able to do that. And what's beautiful that it's not just me. I'm not by myself in this role of advocacy and activism, that there are other people that we have here today who do the same. Just a reminder, if you're watching with us on live stream, the link there pinned to the top gives you our agenda, which includes the bios of each speaker that's on our program. But I would like to call up first Monique, or her nickname Mo, Bryant, who is the Executive Director of Challenging Racism.
Good evening. Thank you, Christian, and thank you to NAMI for having this critical conversation. It is so very important and so very timely. Before I get started, I'd like to ask everyone here and everyone that's joined us virtually, if you would think about one word, one phrase, that can currently describe your mental health or your mental bandwidth. You can write it down, put it in your phone, but we're going to come back to it in just a bit. So one word or one phrase that describes your current mental health or mental bandwidth. I'd like to introduce the organization that I'm the executive director of. As Christian said, I have the privilege of being the executive director of a local nonprofit named Challenging Racism. And our mission is very simple yet powerful. We strive to empower and inspire people to disrupt racism, one compassionate conversation at a time. And that's what this is, a compassionate conversation about mental health in the Black community. Although Black people are not a monolith, we know that because of historical systemic inequities and unfortunately present inequities, we can talk about some of the things that we see systemically. And when I think about the observations and the lived experiences that I'm having in this current role as the executive director of a DEI organization, the thing that weighs on my heart day in and day out is safety. Safety for our staff, safety for our board members, safety for our partners, what it means to partner with an organization with the name Challenging Racism. And when I started to reflect more on that safety and what that meant, I thought about all of the complex ways we talk about safety and wellness. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the layers of that. The physical safety, the toll of Black and brown bodies from systemic oppression, from violence, from lack of healthcare access. Our spiritual health and wellness, the impact on faith communities, members, attendees, parishioners, congregation members, and mostly on our faith leaders, those that have a passion to inspire people, to let them know that God hasn't left them and what it does to their mental health. And then I thought about the emotional toll, and I thought about the constant need to wear a mask to navigate societal expectations for our mental health, for our race, what it means in our community. And then, as always, I thought about our mental health and the intersectionality that sometimes we have to take these things into silos versus looking at them as a whole and looking at the intersectionality of the burdens combined with the lasting effects of racism and epigenic trauma and how it affects our mental health in ways that haven't quite yet been studied and definitely not quite understood. And so as I was thinking about those, I was like, you know what? I want to break this down into 3 groups because I know we have just a little bit of time. And so I thought about how does this affect Black men, right? And I said, well, let me just do 1 point per subgroup. When we think about the impact of societal emasculation, the expectation to be strong, to be unemotional, the lack of safe spaces to talk about mental health, what does that do? What is the impact? And I'm going to tell you, Black men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than Black women. And as Christian was so vulnerable and brave to say that statement, the first thing I thought and wrote down is, at what cost? We survive, but at what cost to our mental health? And then, of course, I'm a mother of 2, and I think about our children and our youth. The psychological burden of growing up in a world where our children are criminalized, they're dehumanized, they are adultified, and they are forced to mature faster than their peers. Why is that? What is the outcome? At what cost? The cost is that from 2007 to 2020, the suicide rate among Black adolescents aged 10 to 17 increased by 144%. 144% for our babies, our most precious commodity. And I deliberately put women last because society puts Black women last. There's assault on Black women's credibility, on our identity, of being told that we're too much. We're too loud, we're too passionate, we're too angry, we're too involved, we're too close to situations, and how that manifests into erasure, whether through cancellation of our programs, thank you, Joy Reid, for lending your voice, the silencing of our voices, or the lack of support when we're trying to access health care, especially mental health care. The unspoken and spoken narrative that we as Black women are so strong that we don't need therapy and we don't need help. And so when I'm having conversations and I'm facilitating or we're in dialogue with partners, they say, well, what can we do? What's next? That answer will look different for everyone. I said it earlier, Black people are not a monolith, but because of inequities, some things we can do together. Anybody here in healthcare, anybody watching in healthcare? Sometimes in healthcare, the first step for any injury is triage. We need to assess the urgency and determine where to start. So with that in mind, I came up with a simple framework that I wanted to leave with you this evening. We all know our ABCs. Acknowledge, breathe, connect. We need to acknowledge when something is happening, recognize it in ourselves and in our loved ones. We need to ask ourselves, we need to name it. Are we experiencing a lack of mental health safety and mental health wellness? How so? Write it down, say it out loud, and remember to give yourself grace because it is okay to not be okay sometimes. And then we're going to breathe. A reminder we all so often need, especially in today's climate, when we're constantly fighting, constantly pushing forward, constantly surviving. Sometimes when I pause to breathe, I try to remember to grab water, because many of us were running on empty. So let that be a gentle reminder. And C for connect. Reach out to your people. Connect with your purpose. Connect with your therapist. Connect with your faith. Connect with whatever grounds you back to mental health and wellness. We may not have all the answers. We won't have all the answers tonight, but I truly believe taking small intentional steps towards our mental health and wellness is how we're going to get there as a community. So A, B, C. Earlier I asked you for one word or one phrase. Everybody remember it? You're acknowledging it. You're acknowledging where you are right now with your mental health and your mental wellness and bandwidth. As I'm closing, I'd like us all to do B together. If we can all take a deep breath. Thank you. And think of a way to connect with each other so that we can have mental health and wellness for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bryant. You know, there's a big highlight came out of there. At what cost? At what cost are we paying as a country and a society where Blackness is political, where mental health is political? And I think the biggest thing that for me to take away from that is how important it is to have people and community. I do a lot of interfaith work nationally, and the theme that just keeps coming up over and over and over again is how important community is going to be right now. Next, if you'll help me welcome Ms. Ashley Whitaker, who is a service member with veterans and families, regional navigator, the Northern Virginia Regional Projects Office, because I'm going to read all your stuff because I find it impressive. And she is also on our NAMI NOVA for Northern Virginia board. And so please help me invite Ms. Ashley Whitaker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited and honored to be a part of this really important discussion today. I want to start by thanking Rebecca and her team for holding space for us and seeking out all of these amazing panelists and community leaders to help facilitate this discussion. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I have a clinical mental health background and experience working in the field for over 15 years. I've lived in many different states and have an extensive background in nonprofit and working with underserved and underprivileged populations. Most of my background has been working with youth and families. I had my own child in 2015 and realized it's time for me to start working with the adult population. And I really found a passion in serving our military community. I am a spouse to an active duty service member, currently still in the Navy. And we do have a special needs child. We've been here since the end of 2023, actually. And where we came from, when I was working in this space, I realized Northern Virginia has a plethora of resources. I was so excited to move to an area where I felt like I can actually make a difference in the lives of the people that I'm working with, because when they're looking for assistance and they're looking for help, I actually have somewhere that I can turn and say, hey, I know of a resource in this community that would be able to help you. I know of some different community providers that offer the services that you're looking for. I came from a very rural part of Georgia that had a military community, but unfortunately there wasn't a lot to offer there, and I felt defeated. When we moved here, I knew I wanted to get a little more involved in my community. I always had hopes of doing that in Georgia. For whatever reason, it didn't pan out. But when I found NAMI, I knew that that was where I needed to be. I knew that that was an area that I can make a difference in the veteran and families community that I'm serving. And I knew that I wanted to engage more with this population. I come from an immigrant family. My family is from Belize. Like many people in the African American community, we did not talk about mental health, ever. We did not talk about things that we were struggling with. We didn't talk to each other openly about some of our diagnosis or things that we felt were maybe shameful due to a number of reasons. And there was a real lack of just knowledge not just in my family, but I noticed also in the community around us. My family and parents not being from this country when they moved here, the idea was we're gonna live the American dream, we're gonna hustle, we're gonna work hard, we're gonna make sure we have a better life for our children, and we'll keep it moving. I know for myself, I knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to work in the mental health space. Even long before experiencing any mental health challenges myself, I knew that that was the space I wanted to be in, and I knew that I could be a conduit for my family to help them and educate them in some of the struggles that we face in our own family as well as in our community. I remember learning as an adult that we have family members that struggled with serious mental illness. It was something that I maybe saw growing up but didn't understand because we didn't have those conversations. And it wasn't until I was an adult, especially once I had my own child, asking the questions, trying to get a little more knowledge about our family background and our makeup, and understanding basically what was missing, why some of these family members either were misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, diagnosed and not receiving treatment, not seeking out the services to help them, and then seeing them really suffer throughout their adult life when they were dealing with these mental illnesses. So I knew for me, it was a passion for me to make sure that I advocate and educate everyone and anyone in any space that I was in. So my job right now, I'm working with Fairfax County as their regional, and it's a very long title. It's Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families. So for short, I'm gonna call it SMVF. It's a very long title, but this program and the office that I work for oversees regional initiatives. My particular program I'm overseeing is what's called STEP VA. It's the state's initiative to ensure that service members, veterans, and their families, so the SMVF community, is being treated in our area and throughout the state at all of the community services boards, and that they have access to mental health and substance use disorder treatment. I think that's huge. There's over 40 CSBs, or community services boards, in the state of Virginia. And this is a statewide initiative to ensure that we're really reforming the mental health system with community health and with mental health services. So part of this initiative is to make sure that the SMVF community has equal access to the services. I find myself, of course, in my role in a lot of military affiliated spaces, and when I bring up the community service boards or the CSBs, nobody has heard of it. People are not aware of the CSBs, even if they maybe have a little understanding or have heard the name CSB, they don't know the services that are provided. They're not aware of what they're able to access, and even if they are aware of the services, they have no idea how to access those services. That's where I come in for the SMVF community. My role as the regional navigator is to work with the community in Loudoun, Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria, and Prince William. whether that be with the providers that work with the SMVF community, or if a veteran themselves or a service member or a family member reaches out to me directly looking for mental health services. I am that bridge, I am the connector, I am the person who's knowledgeable of the community resources. And like I said, Northern Virginia has plenty, and I've noticed that a lot of these resources and services are going untapped. So I've made it my mission to engage in the community, to perform as much community outreach as possible so that I can make sure that this population is fully aware of what's available to them. I'd like to cover a couple of statistics, and I'm going to read off of my paper to make sure I get this correct. In the Black community as a whole in the U.S., there's about 21% of the African American population that reports living with a mental illness. However, only 39% of that population reports actually receiving mental health services and having their treatment needs met by providers. There are also similar rates of substance use disorder for Black Americans in comparison to their white American counterparts. There's a higher rate of illicit drug use, and like I said, higher rates of untreated treatment needs. And also, I think it was touched upon earlier, I believe it was Mo, the rates of deaths by suicide has declined between the years of 2018 and 2020. However, we saw an increase in those rates amongst Black men and men of color specifically. Now, we do know, even though those rates declined between those years, in more recent years, as of 2022 and up, those rates continue to rise, and they continue to rise in the African American population as well. Now, when we're talking about the Black veteran community specifically, it looks very similar and parallels the Black American experience as far as statistics goes. There are about 2 million veterans living in the United States that identify as Black or African American today. 12 to 15% of them report living with a mental illness. The Department of Veteran Affairs have found that Black veterans are more likely to develop post-traumatic PTSD disorder in comparison to their white counterparts. However, a study of the VA and their benefits have found that those same Black Americans or veterans who were diagnosed with PTSD were denied VA benefits for that exact same diagnosis in comparison to their white veteran counterparts. Now, why is that? There's a lot of reasons that could be. We all know that in the African American community, we're facing a lot of stigma and mental health challenges. The same is true for Black veterans. There are higher rates of depression and suicide amongst Black veterans. These challenges stem from systemic issues like racism, economic inequality, and lack to access of quality care. Now, I think for people who are not as familiar with the SMVF community, the idea is that the VA is there. The VA can help this population, and they offer all of the services and the treatments that they need. However, that is definitely not the case. For a number of different reasons, Black veterans don't always go to the VA. And just like the VA, in the regular community as well, we face a lot of barriers to getting equitable health care. Black veterans have very unique challenges that they face, not just in their military experiences, but also in their civilian life that others really don't have to deal with. So some of those barriers, which ring true for the African American community as well, includes lack of equitable health care, lack of diversity amongst healthcare providers. It's something like 2% of African American psychiatrists are Black in the United States. 3% of African American psychologists are Black in the United States. And overall, there's only about 11% of overall mental health care professionals that are Black in the United States. Imagine being an African American person, having military experience, looking for a healthcare provider to treat your needs, and finding out that you can't see a provider that is of the same race and has the same cultural background as you. I can say from my own experience, I've dealt with that many times. Still being married to someone who's still serving active duty, we have lived in places where we had a lot of access to healthcare, and we've lived in areas like the area we came from previously where there was very minimal providers. And of those providers, I almost never, ever got the choice to be seen by a Black provider. So it always has been a struggle in my own personal life, as well as in the Black veteran community, to find a provider that I could really identify with, that would be able to meet my needs and understand my cultural background and my experience, both as a military spouse, as an African-American woman, as a mother, as a child of immigrant parents, and I can go on and on. I think an important part of overcoming some of these barriers is outreach and engagement, ensuring that the community is aware of the resources, but not just aware of what's available to them, but how to access those resources. I will say the Fairfax CSB, they offer tons of resources for the African American community as well as for the veteran community. They have a 24-hour emergency walk-in psychiatric service that's available. They also have a mobile crisis unit that will come out and do evaluations and assessments right where you're at if you're needing it. We have a lot of specific SMVF resources in this area, a lot of nonprofits. There are a lot of segmented programs within a lot of these nonprofits that focus on minority SMVF. I think there is a flyer and there's a resource list that will be available to anyone who was interested. So I want to end with, how do we support this community? What do we do? How do we support the SMVF community? First, I would say to educate yourself, as well as others. Be the voice, make sure you speak up in all spaces, and make sure if you have a veteran, a service member, or a family member that's related to a veteran in your life, you reach out to them, you check in on them, you let them know what resources are available to them. You let them know that I'm available to them. I'm here. I know there's only one of me, but I'm here and I do everything I can to make sure that I meet the needs of all who reach out to me. That's specifically what my job is, and that's what I'm here to do. I also want to make sure that I talk about just some of those unique experiences and how the veteran community is some of the most vulnerable. This community is at a higher risk of homelessness, of unemployment. You would think after serving your country that you wouldn't have to worry about these things. That's often not the case. So it's really important for all of us to do our part, whether we have someone and a special connection to that population or not, to make sure that we speak up and that we educate ourselves and that we advocate for this population. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. What a lot of resources that are available to us. And I think a lot of times it's difficult to navigate how to access those resources, and it's so important to have someone to do that. Next, we're going to invite up Colonel Jim Page, a retired U.S. Army, who is the Executive Director of Concerned Citizens Network of Alexandria. Colonel Page's gift to our community is partnerships. And he's brought so many partnerships to Alexandria and really made mental health the focus of our community so that everyone can experience what true wellness looks like. And when everyone's well, the community's well. And we really see that out of CCNA. So please help me welcome Colonel Page.
Good evening. I really hate some of these sessions when I follow Mo and these other smart ladies. They come up with notes and numbers. All right. Good evening. I'm Jim Page, and I'm the Executive Director for CCNA, and that's the Concerned Citizens Network of Alexandria. I'm going to be brief because I'm following Mo and her colleague. Let me tell you first about being a vet. Your comments are so well placed. I'm working on a project in Alabama with vets, homeless vets, and suicide prevention. One of the issues we run into is most vets kill themselves with guns. Alabama is one of the leading states with guns, but yet they won't stop using guns. So you're fighting that dual battle of, I'm gonna kill myself with guns. So it's a circular argument we're going through. So I appreciate your efforts, but it's a continuing battle. Let me tell you a little bit about CCNA, and then I'll circle back and talk about community engagement. We started CCNA in 2009 when the Washington Post did an article about T.C. Williams High School. It's now called Alexandria High School. That said it was the worst high school in the state with the highest dropout rate. That's not good. So a few people got together who were concerned about the dropout rate and said we can do something about that. And we did. We started looking at STEM and reading for kids at the high school, and they started doing better. And I was retired, I just retired. I was doing good. I wanted to do that and then sail off into the sunset. And what happened, things change, and they do change. Scores got better, and then all of a sudden, George Floyd died. John Lewis died, and the world changed, and the community changed. And then this thing called COVID came into town, and things changed. And then I realized that as a black man in this community, I had to change. I had to stop playing noontime basketball and having casual conversations with my frat brothers and start working with my friends Alan Lomax and other guys and address mental health in our community. Because in my walk of life in the community, young black guys look at me as a colonel and say, look, what we're gonna do, how can we address these issues in our community? So my role in the community with the help of my good friend Christian and other folk, we look at engaging our community to address not just mental illness, but mental wellness. And that includes a good place to live, a strong place to learn. So my conversations are not just around mental illness, it's a good conversation with our superintendent of schools. How do you get kids to school safely? And how do you feed them when they come home? When you talk to a kid at Hammond Middle School, will they be safe and secure knowing that when they get home, will their parents be there when they get home? Will they cry when you tell them, I don't know whether your parents will be there or not? So my role in the community is to be that voice for my community that says, I know that I can go to the mayor and have a good conversation around what we need to do about immigration, about the next generation of immigrants coming from El Salvador, so that when we need more housing, it's not just a casual conversation. So one of the things that I am abhorrent to do is to go to the city council and complain about how bad things are. I want to go and say, this is what we need to do to fix it. And the way you do that is you have these kind of sessions. You listen to Mo, you listen to Ashley, and you check their points, and you put numbers behind them, and you put analysis behind them, and you work with folk, and you come up with a matrix that says, for this, the dash buses are free for the next 2 years. But what happens in the year 3? How do you get kids from here to there? So that part becomes, to me, as a near 30-year veteran, is how do we turn tactics into strategy? And trust me, emotion is not a strategy. You can preach all you want to, but until you can tell a kid, here's a token for lunch, the kid can't eat off passion. So when I come to these sessions, sometimes I look around the room thinking, who's in the room that can make a difference? But more importantly, who's not in the room? So when you look around, there's some folk here who need to be in this room. On the screen now, Mo, there's some of your friends who need to say, okay, I heard what Mo said. I heard what Ashley said. Look at me, Ashley. I'm a vet. Some people don't even know what you do. But there's some guy right down Prince Street right now who's starving to death because he does not know that there's a CSP out there that can help him, who's gonna go to bed hungry tonight because they don't know who you are. That's a shame. Even though your husband is a Navy vet, and we count Navy guys as vets too. We do. We count them as vets. So what we can do from these forums is leave here with a bigger toolkit that says, I know now that NAMI has a plan to join with Alan Lomax in the Community Health Improvement Plan so this community can become even more engaged. So every time I get a microphone in front of me, I'm not talking about how bad things are. I want to get with Alan over a cup of coffee and with Dan and with Rebecca and say, okay guys, this is the game plan. What are we going to do the next time around to make this city move? So when I see our good mayor, Aaliyah Gaskins, walking down the street with her 2 little boys, we'll pull to the side of the road and just say, hey, Colonel, what do you think? and it's not how bad things are, what can we do, Jim? Can we meet at Glory Days for a cup of coffee? Can we come together at church on Sunday with the firefighters? Can we bring the chief of police in here and sit down and talk about safety for our kids? Can we make our community safe and engaged? Can we take mental health to the next level? So when we have these sessions, it's about taking it to the next level. And I'll quote our favorite black artist, Maya Angelou. Don't tell me what I said. How do I make you feel? You're nodding your head, and I know you agree with me, that sometimes when we get into church, it's not about preaching, it's about learning and sharing. So my advice to all of us, to make our city move, engage with each other. Don't be afraid, because I am not a white guy. Don't be afraid to grab Alan Lomax by the hand and say, Alan, let's talk, man. What do we need to do in the Hispanic community to make sure that we're tight, that we know that we got trouble in the city? Don't be afraid to grab a guy by the hand. I'm a basketball player. Well, I was before COVID. So sometimes when you sit in the sauna and you say to Carl Chagall, Carl, what do you think, bro? He's not on Route 1. He'll say, sir, we don't have any good hospital facilities on Route 1. What do you think? I said, Carl, until you come to some of these meetings and get a suicide prevention council on Route 1, you're never going to get one. So you got to come to the big city and talk. So those are the kind of conversations we have with each other, so we know each other. So when I'm in my ambassador role as a senior black guy in the community, I take it seriously. Oftentimes I joke, but I'm serious about it. I'm a granddad. I watched my granddaughter grow up. Last weekend I had a family meeting in Houston, Texas with my granddaughter. She said, Granddad, what can I do now that the world is changing? And my advice is really simple. The first thing you can do is make sure that you graduate from college, that you're not dependent on anybody to define your life. So my advice to you guys on the screen, you guys here, define your own destiny. Take care of your own house, and make sure that every day you wake up, that you're reaching out to touch somebody else, and that you make Mo's word resonate with you. And that when I call my friend Christian Bentley, and that's all the time, that we say the next time we get together, we're gonna do something else and make this city move. So to all of you here, and Dan, I'm looking at you, April 10th, right here in this place, we're gonna continue this conversation. I'm running out of notes. I got one other thing I wanna say, and I do this all the time, and I say it very clearly. Alexandria is a good place to do good, but we need help. Thanks.
Thank you, Colonel Page. Community, right? Black mental health is going to continue to matter. It's going to continue to be important. It's going to continue to be discussed. Challenges are going to continue to be met because we're going to work together. And I think Colonel Page highlighted that brilliantly. Next, we're going to have another Mo come up, Miss Morgan Meadows, who's a school-based program manager for Our Minds Matter.
Hi, everybody. I feel like Colonel Page, where I'm like, I don't want to follow all these amazing people, and I'm just so honored to be on this panel with all of you today. My name is Morgan Meadows. I'm the school-based program manager at Our Minds Matter, and we are a local nonprofit that is ultimately working towards a day where no teen dies by suicide. I'm gonna let that sit for a second. We are working towards a day where no teen dies by suicide, because that is unfortunately not our reality today. I was sitting in the audience and sort of meditating on what everyone was saying, and I think something that has really stuck with me, I wanted to get up here and talk about, our work and all the amazing things that we're doing with our clubs, but I think something that you said, Colonel Page, that's really sticking with me is, how do you become that person that can actually take action for a young person? Can you provide a bus pass? Can you provide lunch money? And I think about my experience in high school where I was that kid. I needed someone to give me a smart trip. I needed someone to help me with lunch money. I almost didn't graduate high school because I could not afford my senior dues. And if it was not for my community, I have no idea where I would be. And I think when I consider my role as a young person who is able to sit at the table with so many people who are coming with lived experience from the way that we used to frame and talk about mental health in the 70s is so different than how we talk about and frame mental health now, and how important it is for me as a young person who has been in the CBOs, who has been in the nonprofit programs, who has participated in all of the youth programming, to have this seat at this table and be able to speak not just on behalf of youth, but still as a young person who is still trying to figure out what it means to be an intergenerational community, especially with the focus on middle schools and high schools like Our Minds Matter does. I don't want to harp on the statistics because I think we've already ground that point in, but I think it is important to name that suicide is still the second leading cause of death for teens aged 10 to 14. It is the third leading cause of death for teens aged 15 to 24. We are in a connection crisis. In 2021, it was declared a state of emergency for youth mental health. And when I sit back and really think about my experiences in high school as a young person in mental health, I could not fathom some of the things that we are doing as an organization right now. Our organization was founded in 2009 when our executive director and her family lost their son and brother Josh Anderson to suicide. He was a student here in Fairfax. He went to Langley High School, and something that everyone loves to say, especially the Anderson family, about Josh is that he probably wouldn't have participated in Our Minds Matter. He was very connected to resources. He had a support team. He had his family rooting for him, but something that the family felt was missing that could have maybe helped save his life was that peer support. And when I think about being a young person and how hard it was to ask for help, how hard it is still to ask for help, I think that is the most important work that I can be doing. As an older sibling, I'm the oldest of 8. My youngest sibling just turned 6 in January. So like everyone is in some form going through the public school system. And when I think about the challenges that they're experiencing, it is so important for me that they not only feel confident, but have the language to identify what they need and to push back when something that is being offered to them is actually not what they need. And I think that is some of the most important work that Our Minds Matter is doing. So we partner with school districts to support students in starting student-led peer-to-peer clubs. So this is a regular club, just like a soccer club or like a mathletes club, except it is completely student-led with the support of some mental health professional or school staff in the building. And part of the reason why we chose the peer-to-peer framework is because we acknowledge that we're only one piece of the puzzle, okay? We are not a team of clinicians. You know, we are not healthcare providers, but what we can do, which I think Ashley spoke a lot about, is we can be that bridge. We can make sure that students know what resources are available to them. We've seen tremendous benefits in being an outsider who's able to come into the school building. I will never forget one time I went to a school and I was talking to a sponsor after, and she was saying, wow, like, I've never seen the students so engaged. Like, I didn't know that person was struggling. Like, I don't think they would have ever come to me to share that information. And it's such a benefit sometimes having an outside person who can come in. And I love being able to have that hands-off kind of big sibling role with the young people that we serve, and share my own experiences with mental health and trying to get services. I too manage a bipolar disorder. I also manage anxiety. I manage depression. I manage a whole bunch of things. And I'm able to manage them because I have learned the language to ask for help, and to seek out help in the communities that I'm in. Something else that I think is really sitting on my spirit as, you know, we're having this conversation and I think about the state of the world that we're in right now is how important it is to make sure that teens are building those protective factors that are proven to decrease the risk of suicide and suicide ideation. And so we've chosen to focus on 4. So the first one is social connection. Again, it's a connection crisis. So we want to make sure that students and teens feel confident in being able to build and sustain positive relationships with their peers, with their families, with school staff, with other community members. We really want to make sure that students and teens, no matter where they are, feel like they belong, because that is the first step in building a community. People have to feel like they belong there. The second protective factor that we try to increase in our teens is pro-social skills. So once you feel connected with someone, do you feel confident in being a bridge for them? Do you feel confident in offering yourself as a support person, as someone in their network? Not everyone feels confident. I know for me, I have come to this space in mental health from my own challenges and my own experience, but it wasn't always easy for me to be a listening ear for someone. I had to learn what it meant to be an empathetic listener. I had to learn what it meant to be a concerned citizen. I had to learn what it meant to actually truly connect with another person, and that is another protective factor that we're trying to instill in young people. The third one, self-care and healthy habits, because the kids got to know how to take care of themselves. That's something that I, as a young adult, am still trying to figure out how to do, is take care of myself. But the very least we can do is make sure that teens have the language and can self-determine for themselves what they need to take care of themselves, and be able to identify, okay, maybe this resource is not for me, but I want to try this one. Or maybe I know a friend or someone close to me who might benefit from that resource. That is what we want to instill in students as we are teaching them and trying to increase their self-care and healthy habits. And then lastly, which I think is the biggest protective factor that helps decrease that risk of suicide ideation, is help-seeking behavior, right? Because we can feel connected, we can feel like we belong, we can feel like we are involved in the community, but if we do not feel confident in asking for help or seeking out those resources, that work really goes nowhere. I think about myself being a senior, knowing that I couldn't afford my senior dues, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to go to prom, knowing that graduation was right around the corner and that I wasn't going to have cords, I was barely going to have a cap, and had I not actually sat down and self-determined for myself, no, this is a thing that I want help, I may have not have graduated high school. And I think that is a powerful tool for young people to have in their toolkits, is being able to ask for help. I think the role particularly that Our Minds Matter plays within this community. Again, Josh Anderson was a student here in Fairfax County. We have been in Fairfax the longest. We support over 33 clubs here in Fairfax County at the high school and middle school level. And something that we've really been able to see over time is the sustainability and how deep the impact goes. We have clubs that have been with us from since like 2013. We have a student now who formerly went to Falls Church High School, who was a club leader, who is now a program coordinator, who is on the ground supporting schools. So part of the work is also creating these pathways for young people to go back into their communities, because the work doesn't stop there. If I would have just stopped after I graduated high school, if I decided not to continue to pursue this, I have no idea where I would be. And I think a lot of what Rebecca, you shared about being in the nonprofit space is like, people are here for passion. It's not about the money, it's not about the benefits, it's definitely not about any of that, but it is because we want to be here and because it is important and necessary work. And when I think of myself as an older sibling, as a daughter, as a spouse, as a cousin, as a friend, as an auntie, as a steward of the world, it is important for me to help people self-determine what they need for themselves, and making sure that they feel confident and comfortable in doing that. And I have just learned so much from just sitting here in the audience and just being with such amazing folks, and I am grateful to continue being in community and collaboration with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm going to invite our panelists to come on up here. Mo and Ashley and Colonel Page, and I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca for a moment.
Just really quickly, I want to thank the people in the audience, like Alan, I'm just kidding, our partners who are both here and on this live stream. Colonel Page talked about partnership, and we're not in a silo. That it's something that I think everyone mentioned, is that we really can't do this alone. So when you're invited to something like this or an event of a group you don't know, please go. Learn something, but get involved too. Most of us are either volunteer-led, like we are. All of our programs are led by volunteers. We rely on volunteers. We rely on the support of our partners, not only in our work, but in how we pay those enormous nonprofit salaries. You saw everybody up here laughed when that was said. So we're going to have questions. They have some questions. Christian has some questions that he's going to ask, but if you have questions, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. This is always my favorite part, when I can sit down and talk to folks, because I feel like it reminds me of being at, a coffee table, grandma's table, and sitting in the living room chatting. And so I hope that that's the kind of authenticity that we all bring this evening while we're chatting. I have some questions here, but I'm never really good about following the rules. But I just want to ask everyone, why is it important that we are here having this conversation?
You're looking at me.
Go ahead, Mo.
Because if we don't, it won't happen. Having mental health conversation should be as common as asking someone or reminding someone to have their mammogram, to have their colonoscopy, to ask and say, have you had a checkup for your mental health and wellness?
One of the things that, and somebody can jump in after this, but one of the things that I like is that this is intergenerational, intentionally. What do you mean? And that there's always that one uncle, this is intergenerational, intentionally, but it's also a beautiful space for Black men and women to sit down and have this conversation. I think it's so important that as a young Black male, as a father, as a brother, as a leader in a faith community, that I speak openly about mental health. And that one of the things that many people who've ever heard me speak, I always say it's not okay to not be okay. I always describe having a bipolar disorder as being on the roller coaster. But I always say ride the ride. I find that if I spend less time worrying about getting off the ride, I do a lot better. And so it's just so important for us to speak openly about it. I can't remember having conversations with my late father. We certainly didn't talk about mental wellness. My grandfather and I sure didn't talk about mental wellness together, or any uncles. And today it's our responsibility to be able to do that.
It's good. Talking about mental illness for a guy at my age, I was in the Army for quite a while. We didn't do that. We didn't talk about mental. No, not as a colonel. You don't do that. You stand in the rain, you sweat, and you just move on. So now when my subordinates, the guys who I knew and served with, they see me doing this, and they go, okay, Colonel, thank you for what you're doing now. And it brings them home. So now they understand that it's okay for them to start talking now. So there's a kind of a gospel thing going on. So when they see what we're doing, they take the mantle and they start doing it, to include my kids. So I feel pretty good about doing it now, even though it's late.
Absolutely. Within our community, what do you think are the biggest barriers in talking about mental health, accessing care to mental health spaces? Ashley, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I touched on some of these earlier. I think some of the barriers for sure is lack of diversity. I talked about earlier that I myself, living in multiple states and seeing multiple healthcare providers in different spaces, never once had a healthcare provider that was Black, someone that I can identify with, someone that can understand my culture. I think other barriers includes just a lack of the ability to access resources. I think I talked about that earlier as well. When I speak about the veteran community, like I said before, the VA seems to be the end-all be-all. That's the go-to, right? But not every veteran or service member or family member wants to utilize the VA's services. Not all VA services are the best. Sometimes there's community providers out there that offer better services or have better access, can for sure see you quicker. I mean, I myself tried to make an appointment with my TRICARE provider and was told I can't be seen until June. What am I supposed to do between now and June? And I can guarantee when I do go to this provider will not be Black. This provider will not understand my background. This provider probably won't be able to identify and make me feel comfortable enough that I would be open and able to share with that provider in the way that I would if I did have maybe a female provider, a Black female provider. So for sure, I would say lack of access as well as lack of diversity. And like I said, mental health space especially, we just do not have the numbers. You know, there are not enough Black healthcare professionals and mental health professionals to be able to provide services to us in the way that we would like.
Thank you. That's a perfect answer. I can tell you do this professionally. You know, we talk about culture a lot, and sometimes that gets misinterpreted or misunderstood. People are like, why does it matter? If you're getting help and there's a doctor, why does it matter? I want to use the word hot comb. Hot comb? Hot comb. You know what a hot comb is? You're having flashbacks.
Literally, I'm like, gosh, don't touch my neck.
But hot comb, right? This is something that you don't have to explain that. I remember the first time speaking with my therapist, who at the time was this very lovely lady, very nice, very, very nice lady. And I said, the anxiety that I was feeling, like when a police officer would drive behind me. And I remember just getting like this deer in headlight look. And I was just kind of like, okay. And then later I had, and I still have to this day, a Black clinician, a Black psychologist who's amazing, and I'm sure she's watching this. And she helped me understand some cultural and generational hurt and trauma I didn't even know existed, and helped me heal in areas that I didn't know that I need healing, that made me such a better father, husband, friend, son, brother, because I didn't even know that existed. And so culture is so important. I want to go to Mo. In Challenging Racism is your nonprofit. And so when you're working at that in 2025, I don't have to give anyone any news updates. We all know the climate that we're living in. How do you see culture playing a role as we move forward and protecting the mental wellness and health of African Americans in the United States?
Ooh, that's a good question. Not to be cliche, but it's going to take all of us. Something that Colonel Jim said is emotion is not a strategy. And I often say I use and utilize my anger into action because I don't live in a place of anger, but I live in a place of action. And I love what you said about intergenerational. When I looked up when we sat down, I realized that my mother was here in the audience. And years ago, my eldest is 21, he's a senior in college. Years ago, I felt like I was fighting for special needs and trying to get them to understand what it meant as a young Black boy. And I'll never forget, and this is where our elders come in, our intergenerational, I looked at her and said, I'm just so tired of fighting. And she said, when you get too tired, I'll fight for you. And as soon as she said it, I didn't need her to fight for me anymore. I knew that I had the wisdom of my elders. I knew that my peers, my younger peers as well, that intergenerationally was going to take all of us, but I could keep fighting. I've been fighting ever since. And I think we need to realize we're not alone. We're not, no one of us, no one organization is doing the work. We're all doing the work. And one thing, Christian, one correction, it's not my organization, it's the community's organization.
Actually, I was coming to you, Colonel Page, so your comment plus, where do you find that stigma adds to the challenges of having and accessing mental health care, but also the inequities? And in Northern Virginia, you're very familiar with the INOVA systems and the health department. Where does stigma meet with systemic inequity, and how challenging is that?
It's a tough fight, for sure. But I want to go back to what Mo had to say, then I'll come back to you. The lack of Black clinicians, you got to start someplace. And INOVA has a program called Dream Big. It's one black doctor at a time. You got to start. So I got to give them some credit for doing that. But they need help. We got to get the young black girls and boys into their program. And that's where the community comes into it. We got to get them into the system. So that's my paperless announcement. But the stigma thing, if we don't talk about it with our young black citizens, they will never be involved. They won't. I'm looking at my colleague here, Blue High School, right? I didn't know that my friend Law Andrews supports Blue High School, and that's the neighborhood that most of my family grew up in. So to get to our community, we have to have adults like me, into the schools, talking to the kids about mental health and personal health to address stigma all the time. So it's not just a one motto. It's you and Father Fetts and folks in the audience talking that walk, the walking and talk, or with everybody else in the community. So I guess my sum up would be, for us to make a difference in our community, Christian, it's got to be you and me with the NAACP doing what we do. It's got to be Saturday morning chats here in the church. So I think it's going to be a long fight. But I'm kind of troubled right now, honestly. When Mo says, I want to fight, she's really saying, I want to fight, but right now I'm not sure what I'm doing. How am I going to fight? And I think that's where the wrong one comes in.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, just on the stigma and culture question, because I see it all the time with our young people, and I think this kind of answers the first question you had, which is why is it important that we're having this conversation? Because if you think about, I'll use my family and my elders as an example. We were not talking about mental health. Like, anytime I tell my grandma about the work that I'm doing, she's just like, question mark. She has no idea what I'm talking about or why it's important. And I can see that she's also trying to stay open. Because she wants to connect with me. She understands that, again, I said I'm the oldest of 8, but I also have a lot of cousins and family members, and so it's a lot of us. And something that I am noticing with my younger cousins and younger family members is that our elders are becoming way more open to having conversations about mental health in a way that they never were when I was a teen. And so when I think about stigma, and when we go into schools, and I ask students, because I think it can be a little bit tricky, because in some schools the visibility of mental health resources is really high, especially if they're an over-resourced school, right? Or not over-resourced, but highly resourced school. And students are still not taking advantage of those resources. And a lot of that comes from mistrust and stigma from the adults in the building. I've been in schools where the crisis response is to call police. I don't even need to tell people in the room all of the layers that come with that, right? And so I think why it's important for us to have this conversation, especially intergenerationally, is because it gives our elders the opportunity to learn, and for our young people to see in real time that their elders are willing to listen and learn and grow with them. And so, yeah.
Keep the microphone, because I want to pivot to something that you said in your remarks earlier about how important it is for peer-to-peer programming with your school. Tell us a little bit about like dive into what it means for young black kids to work peer-to-peer with each other, the impact that they have that we can't have. We did really good with intergenerational, but I think next time we need a team up here.
Let me tell you, it is something to witness. Being able to be in a predominantly black school in an under-resourced community like Blue and Ward 8, so they are east of the river, southeast DC, and to see a library full of black teens, predominantly black men, talking about the challenges that they're going through. To sit in a room and watch every single young black student share a rose, thorn, and bud, something that went well for them, something that didn't go so well for them, something that they're looking forward to, is so extremely powerful. And I struggle with coming out of those spaces, because then I get upset, because then I'm like, well, why is this not everywhere? Why is this not happening at every school? What do we need to do to make sure that this is protected and happening in every single school? And the peer-to-peer school most of the day, so they have access to mental health professionals, they have teachers, they have so-called folks that are supposed to be trusted adults in the building, but the reality is, not every student is gonna go to an adult. And so it is important for us to equip other young people with the skills to be able to support their peers. Because we can't do everything as adults, and we shouldn't. And I think part of the challenge and what we have to remember is that we are also trying to raise good citizens, good humans, and I'll be very honest. I didn't become a good human until very recently. That is something that I had to put the work in to learn how to do. And if someone would have stepped in maybe when I was 14 or 15 and helped me to understand why that was important for me to grow, I would have been a better human sooner.
That's a good point.
Can you define intergenerational seriously?
Yeah.
What's it look like to you?
So I think intergenerational is where you have, it's not just age, but it's experience. You know, it's experience. I think, I'm not going to get into our ages, ladies, but I think even probably amongst us, there's an intergenerational where you have different experiences based on how you grew up and who raised you. Like if you were raised by an aunt or a grandmother, that's a different experience than by a teenage mom. But it also includes a grandparent. So it's a wide berth.
So it's not just age.
It's not just age and experience. It's 75% age and 25% experience. I move over here to this side. Ashley, I'm going to come to you real quick. Peer-to-peer is so important with young people, right? But how does peer-to-peer play a role in partnerships and working with veterans and their families and expanding resources? What does that look like in your organization and in your work?
So for me, in the work that I do, one of the main parts of my job is to make sure that I'm networking constantly with other providers in the community so that not only are they aware that I'm here, I exist, here's the services that I offer, but then I can also learn and educate myself on what's available to the veteran community so that when someone walks up to me and says, hey, I'm really struggling, I'm having a hard time finding this resource, or I know of these resources, but I'm having a hard time even just getting someone to pick up the phone, give me a call back, getting an appointment, I know who I need to contact, I know what route I need to take and what path I need to go through to make sure that I'm guiding that veteran to helping them access those services. I really do believe in collaboration. I really feel like with the VA being the main mental health and medical resource for the veteran population, not just here, but everywhere, I think it takes a certain effort on their behalf to make sure that they are engaging this population in the communities that they live in, but also making sure that they're engaging the other providers that are in those communities that want a seat at the table, that want to help, and that want to make sure that their organizations are seen and heard. I think if the VA is able to collaborate with our community providers, we can reach a much larger veteran population and make sure that they are having equal access to these healthcare providers and services. And that to me looks like very simple things with community outreach, like going to the Black churches. I myself am Catholic. I've lived here for a year and a half and had no idea that there was this amazing Black church here and some of the roles and the services that are offered and some of the initiatives that you guys do here. I'm amazed. I live pretty far from here. I don't live in this area, but it's enough to make me say, let me come out here and come to a Mass. I would love to experience this and not only experience it for myself, but bring my young Black child, my son, so that he can experience this. When I walked through the doors today and I saw all of the representation, the first thing I did was texted my husband to say, look at this. My husband is not Catholic, he is Baptist. So even him having knowledge of my religion and my faith, seeing the pictures and the videos I sent him was like, we need to go. We need to come to Mass. We need to experience this. I will be here. And I think it's really important to make sure that that awareness is out there. I also think it's really important to make sure that veterans have other veterans that have shared experiences with them that they can go to as a peer to make sure that they have someone, a listening ear, who really totally understands everything that they've been through. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but Black service members are often more exposed to trauma because they're more often on the front lines when they're in service. So they, of all people, compared to their white counterparts, really need to understand and know that there is a community for them. There are resources for them, and that those partnerships are available. And it takes people like me, people like you, and everyone else out here to make sure that we're coming together to better serve that population.
You mentioned churches. I am a Catholic mental health and social justice advocate, and I work a lot in interfaith spaces, locally and nationally. And I believe that the faith community has a huge role to play in breaking down stigma and creating pathways towards not only partnerships, but towards access to care in the community. Many times churches are the front lines. We are the food pantries. We are the rental assistants. We are the clothing drive. And so we're dealing with people who are our most vulnerable citizens. And we have to do more than just provide their immediate needs. We also must help them provide things that will give them wellness so that they can have a complete and whole life. That's dignity. And so I want to open this up to everyone here. When we're talking about the role of faith communities, grassroots organizations like CCNA, national groups, what role do we all play in partnering with one another to help service the community? Now, we're talking about Black folk, but really this is the community in general as a whole. If Black people are healthy and well, America is healthy and well. I mean, everyone will benefit from this. What does that look like? How do we do that? Why is it important? Take which one? Don't take all of them.
Say that part again. If the Black community is whole, America is whole.
We're all in this fight together. Who wants to take that?
I'll take it. I can take this personally. In our organization, and I'm seeing this as seriously, I try real hard to make sure that when I say community, it's not just the Black community. And I'll say this in the sense, if we have something, it's understood that I am Black. That's not a secret. I'm Black. But everybody understands that they're welcome, and I want them to come and contribute. So when Christian and I have something at the church, people understand that they're welcome, and we're sponsoring it, but we want them to contribute. So when we have something like, not prayer breakfast, a stakeholder breakfast once a quarter, we want people to come, bring their troubles to the table, and let's talk about them together. So one of the things we can do is make sure that we are a Black community, a welcoming community for everybody. So our whole thing is, let's make this a safe place for everybody to come and share and talk about the issues that affect everybody. If you look at our website, we've got about 50 partners. Tenants and Workers United. Our good friend from Eritrea is here today. She's my neighbor. We work with her in her community. So it doesn't really matter. We just want to make sure that this is a place of welcoming and being safe. So in this city, and this sounds really selfish and arrogant, but I'm not going to say that, but if CCNA is holding something, people will come. They will come. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's fair. Mo, I want to come down to you. Partnerships, breaking down barriers, creating access to and pathways to care, bringing it to people. Why is it so important that we all work together?
So it's a two-part, and this is my jam. Collaboration is my jam. Okay. So when you talked about interfaith community, I serve on the board of an organization, Interwoven Congregation. Shout out to that. And people in the organization and our board believe that it is a faith community's responsibility to move social justice forward. What is social justice? Social justice look like? It looks like mental health and wellness. It looks like making sure that there are not food deserts. It looks like making sure that our children are educated. It looks like making sure our elders have transportation and their needs met. It looks like making sure we're talking and taking care of our veterans. It looks like taking care of the community. All of them. And so, for me, I believe that our faith leaders, they're the shepherds. We're their flock. And if you have a faith leader, whether it's a synagogue, a mosque, a church, say, well, you know what? I had a checkup with my therapist. And you have a conversation, like, you said therapist in the pulpit? And it's a level of acceptance.
I think that's very important. One of the things we talk about a lot in faith action with mental health is accompaniment. And so faith does not replace clinical help, right? So there's a difference between your spiritual health and your mental health and your financial health. And so we want to always make sure we differentiate the two. But I will tell you, my faith is a grounding part of my wellness. I was not able to achieve wellness until I was spiritually well. When I was spiritually well, I became mentally well. When I was mentally well, I lost a couple pounds and I got physically well. When I did that, my money got right. I became financially well. To have complete wellness is the whole package. We are complex human beings. We are spiritual and physical and emotional. And so all of those things are important to maintain. And I'll say this about faith. It may be anyone else with lived experience can say this too. You are not cured by your faith, but it can certainly be a healing. It can certainly be a healing. Amen. I'm going to open up to a few questions out in the audience, and I'm going to take moderator's right and ask the last question. So any questions from our audience? Please.
First of all, this has been really great to hear all of your perspectives, and I really want to thank you. So my question is, I know the pipeline and the lack of diversity in the provider community is a very serious concern. And Ashley, I've done a little looking at the statistics. You are absolutely spot on. It's incredible. So the question is, the pipeline will not be fixed for a time. I mean, we're talking, 5 to 10 years. So what is it that the provider community should know more about so that we can make sure that people get the help they need, better understanding of culture and more before we fix the pipeline issue? And I couldn't agree more, we have to start much younger. We should start at the high school and middle school level to help them understand the value of a profession in healthcare. But we have a time that we have to wait. So I just am really curious about what do we do to make sure clinicians address the needs of people in the meantime?
So one of the things is we have to educate our providers, all of our. In America, we don't want to have a conversation about history, about real history. A gentleman that's called the father of gynecology. Okay, so I don't have to tell the panel. The gentleman that is called the father of gynecology did all of his experiments on enslaved women without anesthesia, thinking that they didn't have a pain tolerance, and so they didn't need medication. Most gynecologists don't know that. When we talk about people having service, whether it's mental health service, OBGYN service, we all know the fetal maternal medicine rate. We're 4 times more likely to die in childbirth or have birth trauma. Yet Black women are not referred for mental health for that trauma. They're not referred to mental health for the mental anguish that they feel that they may die just to have a family. So we have to educate our providers. We have to educate them that our medical books are based on white-skinned people. And so asthma, eczema, underlying conditions, comorbidities may look different because you haven't learned it, because it hasn't been taught. It's the same, especially for mental health. The video that I wanted to use, but I didn't use for timing, is that Black youth, I don't want to quote the exact statistic, but it is a fact that they are more likely to be diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder versus ADHD. That a Black person experiencing a mental health crisis is more likely to have a much stronger medication and be sedated than to say, are you having a moment there where we need to talk to your provider? They are much more likely to be jailed if you are neurodivergent, if you're on the autism spectrum, if you have any sort of underlying disability, than to get the help that they need. So we have to start educating our providers on the history, on the mistrust, on Henrietta Lacks and HeLa cells, on the Tuskegee Airmen, on true history.
Stigma. You know, our mainstream doctors may not know that, but we know that. We know that for generations. And so it's probably, well, why don't black people go to the doctor, and why won't they take the medication, and why is there so much mistrust? Are you kidding me? Because this is our history in the United States with the medical system. It's a joke. And so I just want to add to that too, is that we have to work, that's an internal thing, that we need partnerships externally, but internally we need to continue to break down the stigma so that we have our children, they want to be a mental health nurse, they want to be a psychologist, they want to be a psychiatrist, but we're not going to accomplish that until we continue to work on the stigma around mental health in our community.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think the second part of that question is, yes, education, but I also think that there is a humbling that needs to happen in clinicians. I think that oftentimes we do think of clinicians and psychologists and psychiatrists as sort of, the last line, but I think that's where that partnership and collaboration comes in. If you, as a clinician, as a provider, know that you are not able to provide the necessary and culturally competent services, then that is your responsibility to connect that person to an organization or to another provider or to other care that could potentially provide those services. So I think that there needs to be some more synergy between providers and community-based organizations and other people doing the work so that, one, again, it doesn't feel like it's all on one person. It's not all on just a psychologist. We all need to have a stake in tier one, that prevention. We can't wait until the crises happen and then we all jump in after. We all have to be committed to that prevention work before it gets there, and that starts with acknowledging your capacity, your skill set, and where you can potentially be a bridge to someone else or connect someone else to other services.
So I have had this conversation with so many people in this room, but we in Northern Virginia, we have a communication problem. And Ashley, you spoke about this and all the resources. I call Northern Virginia the land of plenty because throughout the country, we have amazing resources. My friend Tiffany, who runs Marcus Alert for Arlington County, we've had this conversation. How do we get the information and the services and the support and all of the work that we do in the nonprofit world, how do we get it to everybody else? Because it's not happening. Nice, easy one.
Yeah, again, partnerships and having organizations together. I think we do something very well in Alexandria, which I'm always going to tout Alexandria as a 10th generation Alexandrian. I am always going to say we're the best place to live. But through CCNA and with partnerships, we have what's called a quarterly community stakeholders breakfast. And it's everyone who is a stakeholder in mental health comes here for breakfast. We're very fortunate. Our police chief shows up. The mayor shows up. The director for the health department shows up. The sheriff's department shows up. The director of NAMI shows up. National organization and partnerships show up. Faith leaders show up. And so really it takes a convener and a bridge builder. And so what we do is we all sit at one big round table, 50, 60 of us, and say what's going on in our organizations, what do we need to do, what's around, and then we try to bounce it around from each other one. But nothing, we can create all the apps and all the web pages in the world. Nothing is going to replace peer-to-peer relationships because that's where trust lies. And that is why it's so important to have people like myself, to have people like Mo, who have lived experience, to be at the table and involved, because someone's going to trust us. Someone's going to trust you, Rebecca, because of your stories. And so when something's happening, I have a large friend group. One of my friends is here tonight. I'm very appreciative. And they know in their sphere, if something comes up with mental health, call Christian. My church community knows if something else comes up with mental health, call Christian. It doesn't feel like a burden to me. And so because it's a trusted source. So I think with all of our resources that we have in Northern Virginia, the land of plenty, it means nothing without relationships. People don't go to apps and they don't go to websites and they don't attend meetings. They have relationships.
You're saying that, and there's an app being built, you know that, right? And you're, okay, as long as, like,
Involvement. Christian and I own about 10 different committees together, and they're not all about mental health. We have a community safety board we're on together. So sometimes you just have to be in the room. So I'm on, I think, 9 different committees in the city, but there's always a mental health voice on the committee. So what we do is we just spread the word. And then last year, we convinced the city to establish a community engagement task force. So if it's something that needs to be spread to the city, we take it to the task force and it comes out in the newsletter. But you gotta read the newsletter. So it's the whole ambassador program that is the running gunfight you have to do all the time.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask our last question. I would say if you have questions for any of us individually, our contact information is in the program that you have with you if you're in person, also the program that's on the link pinned in the chat, where you can reach out to us and ask us questions and further on the conversation. But here's my last question to everyone. So we've had this conversation. We've said Black mental health matters. We've talked about resources and partnerships. We've dreamed a little bit. We've complained a little bit, but it was very elegant complaining. I will give us credit for that. What are we, as a community in Northern Virginia, as Black mental health leaders, what are we going to do this year, leaving here in 2025? What are you going to do?
I'll go ahead and start off this one. I know for me, it's to be a bridge for healing, not just healing within my own personal family unit, but healing for the community. I think it's extremely important to have these type of events here where we're having this open discussion, where we're discussing a lot of the things that affect our community, and hopefully we're able to take that and spread it throughout those who were not here to join us today and the remainder of the community. I think it's really important to also have those discussions in the places where you will find the Black community. Specifically for me, the veteran community. You will find me at the VFWs, at the American Legions, at the VA, at all of the community events. I will go to events that have nothing to do with veterans in hope that I have that one veteran who might come by or I might run across to say, hey, how's it going today? Are you connected with the VA? Do you have your benefits? Are you seeing a provider? Do you need help accessing any of these resources? I like to insert myself wherever possible, especially being, I guess I still consider myself a little bit newer to the Northern Virginia area. If someone reaches out to me, if someone says there's an event, I'm there. I will be there in hopes that I could connect even with one veteran.
That's fantastic. What about you, Mel?
So remember I said I don't live in anger, I live in action?
Mm-hmm.
So you said your friend Tiffany Jones, and that's my friend as well. It's actually how I met Rebecca. Community is everything, and community is not just your town or your city that you live in. It's people that you come in contact with. Mm-hmm. And as Mo, without the E said, we need to really reach our youth. We need to stay with our youth. So I'm not leaving my job. I'm going to keep leading challenging racism, but in 2025, to make sure that we are listening to the voices of our youth and making sure that we're talking about mental health and gender identity and race, and making sure that as in Virginia, that we lean into DEI and it doesn't come out of our schools. I personally decided to run for the school board in Arlington.
Being a nonprofit, we do not promote any candidates here, but we are certainly happy, just my little disclaimer, we're certainly happy to hear that someone will be running in Arlington. That's so awesome. Let's go down here. Mo, what are you going to do in 2025?
In 2025, I would like to continue being a dedicated person in terms of bridging the gap and helping to facilitate conversations between young people and our elders, because my family, I'm very fortunate where I have some elders left, and I'm like, while y'all still here, y'all gonna learn about mental health and y'all gonna like it. Okay, so I think that is my commitment, is to continue having those conversations, but also not just to educate, but also because what I want and my hope is for the elders in my family is for them to start doing some of that reconciliation, and so they can know that they're not alone, and that even the challenges or experiences that they were facing, even though they might look a little bit different now, that there is still solidarity here and that we're still learning and moving through it together. So I want to keep that message.
Colonel Page.
I think I'm just going to try to make my voice even stronger in the community.
That's a heavy statement. I am going to be a beacon of hope in 2025. I'm a person of faith, and the scriptures tell us to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And I take that very seriously. I want to be a beacon of hope that, number one, wellness is attainable. You have to take your medicine, you have to go to therapy, you have to be healthy, you have to have a good sleep routine, and the list goes on and on and on. But wellness is 100% attainable, and I want to be a beacon of hope for that. I also want to be a beacon of hope that it is okay to not be okay. It is okay to not be okay. You are not a bad person. You are not terrible. You are not worth anything less. And so I want to be that beacon, that light in our community, especially for Black men. To own that, because if we're healthy, our families are healthy, our communities are healthy.
I'd like to share 30 seconds of something that's been on my heart. I work with veterans, PTSD, suicide. A young man called me about 2 weeks ago, and I won't give his name, but he called and he said, can you listen to me for a minute? I said, sure. He said, just put your phone down. And I put my phone down. And he didn't say anything. So I said, Alex, are you still there? He says, just give me 1 more minute. So I waited 2 minutes. And then he picked up the phone and he said, sir, I'm okay now. I said, what's wrong? He said, I'm close to suicide, but I just wanted to hear your voice. Then he said, nah, I'm okay. So I'm sharing with you that somebody needs to hear your voice. So when you leave here, just understand that somebody out there needs to hear your voice. You never know who it is, but our soldiers and our children often just need to hear your voice. So as you leave, just remember people are listening for your voice.
Thank you, Colonel Page. Thank you to all of our panelists so much for sharing your gifts and your knowledge with us. Thank you to NAMI for hosting this conversation and for highlighting how important it is for African Americans and for the Black community to continue to talk about mental health, but also to acknowledge that our needs are a little bit different. And different is not a bad word. Thank you for allowing me to moderate. Thanks for my community here at St. Joseph for always being open and available. And if you need to contact any of us, please reach out to us. Our contact information is in the program.
Thank you. For people here, we're going to be going downstairs. There's some resources down there. There's also some water and some treats. So I hope you'll join us down there. I want to point out a few things in terms of our why. In terms of NAMI Northern Virginia, our why is led by our national organization, which is very helpful to have leadership that believes in health equity, that believes in what we, mental health for all. And there's a reason behind that those are our taglines, is because we see this. While I call us the land of plenty, we see this across the country. We see where we don't have services like our crisis services and Marcus Alert, where it's a fight every single year to get more money to offer what we consider kind of the basics. So on the national level, we're able to do that advocacy. We're able to try to make change, but there's also programs that help us, the little guys. So one of those is called Community Health Equity Alliance, that NAMI Northern Virginia was recently asked to be a part of as an expansion. Some of the people, everybody here, I'm not gonna lie, we're setting up an alliance in Northern Virginia with people that can make a difference. Christian talked a lot about, and Colonel Page, about we need action. We need to figure out how to create that. And an alliance is something that can help us do that here in Richmond, but across the country. NAMI is an alliance. We have, from the top down, I have 3 of our C-level national members, people that work at our national office are here. Our national office is in Arlington. It's pretty okay. But what we're trying to do across the country is create these voices. I don't have this lived experience. If, going by Jim Page said he's Black, I'm not. But I learn from these stories. And together, that's what we're trying to impact change. Now, I got asked a couple of times recently, why are you okay? Are you worried about having as a small nonprofit, especially in your area, having something that's calling out injustices, that's calling out problems in the Black community? Are you worried for your nonprofit? I have a great board that supports our work, but we're also taking our cue from our national office. It's not just about the Black and brown and colored communities, it is about mental health for all. And so we have to have these hard conversations, but we also have to figure out what the action is after that. So I hope you'll join us as we do that, as we take the next steps throughout Northern Virginia. So thank you all. Come meet us downstairs.